most countries. The United States has the most expansive guarantees of freedom of expression that ever existed. They were hard fought and won through struggle. And so, factually, but it's rhetorically, I think, dangerous because there are a lot of people afraid to speak because of social pressure. And when you add onto it this sort of fear of the government and legal restrictions, people who are already afraid to talk for social reasons will even be more afraid to talk out of some fear of being thrown in jail. And nobody, at least people from the more privileged sectors, is in any danger of being thrown in jail for speaking out against the war right now. So I think we have to focus on things like the USA Patriot Act, secret detention. There's real problems with it. But even the USA Patriot Act is nothing like the assault on civil liberties that went on in Vietnam.
Let me start by talking about what I think the task of the anti-war movement is, which is not simply to end the coming war against Iraq or try and mitigate the most brutal of its consequences, but to construct a movement that sees not war as the central organizing task, but empire. So that it requires that first we understand the United States as the empire. Persuading people within the United States that we are in fact an empire. That is becoming somewhat easier because the ruling elite of the United States are beginning to use the term themselves. What the Bush administration is trying to sell to the American public, the notion of the first benevolent empire, the first empire that goes across the world, not to acquire resources, not to acquire control, but simply to spread peace, justice, and freedom. In the words of our campaign against Afghanistan, enduring freedom. But of course, most of the world knows what it means to endure American-style freedom already. So the task is to put forward that analysis to the American public. As citizens of the empire, we have broad political freedoms and the capacity, I believe, to use them to dismantle the empire from within. The central task is how to repoliticize a population that has been depoliticized. It is almost as if as more and more freedoms are won, they are used less and less. Another central problem in organizing an anti-empire movement in the United States. In most mass movements, popular movements, movements for social justice that have existed, people are struggling to liberate themselves from power and oppression. The motivation for the movement is in a sense self-interest. There is an unjust system imposing illegitimate authority on you, and you want to. The story of the 20th century in the United States, I believe, to a large degree, is the story of an incredibly successful propaganda campaign to break people of what I would say are natural tendencies toward compassion, toward solidarity, toward the search for meaning in life, and to train people toward consumption, isolation, fragmentation, and the belief that that affluence will provide the meaning that they sorely lack. What has happened in the United States is that the propaganda system, the system of power, has essentially redefined what it means to be a human being. And what it is to be a human being is to be comfortable, affluent, protected. Self-interest has come to mean a very narrow self-interest in the United States. And it is very hard to organize people against their own material interests when their self-interest is so narrow. The United States faced a fundamental choice. The United States could have, after September 11th, seen in that tragedy the gift of reassessing, the gift of change, the gift of going forward in the world in a new way. The United States had that moment where we could have chosen that new path. And George Bush helped make sure not only that we did not choose that new path, but that no one dared consider it. And one of the things he said when asked about what kind of changes in the way Americans live might come from September 11th, he spoke often of our way of life, the American way of life. His press secretary once referred to it as God's way of life, as if God herself had touched it. But the fact is that George Bush actually said something honest and true in that moment about our way of life. And it was implicitly reaching out to the American public and saying, if you like the level of affluence at which you live, if you like the toys you have, then you have to allow me to pursue the project of empire. And our way of life will be protected. And I think that is, again, one of these fundamental questions we in that movement have to face, is to make a convincing case that our way of life is no way for humans to live. Right now, the American public is deeply invested in that way of life. And I must say, so is much of the American left, and many other movements in many other places have. We have more to work with, in a sense. Yet we face the paradoxes, in some sense we face a more difficult struggle in that task of literally helping an entire country redefine what it means to be a human being. And the only claim I can make often to my audiences in the United States, as I said at the beginning, I think our task is to dismantle the empire from within. And I tell people that if they do not engage in that task, if they do not take up that task, there is only one other way the empire can end, the way every empire has ended. And on September 11th, when those planes flew into those buildings, for me, that was a glimpse at the future. That is how the empire will end if we do not dismantle the empire from within, which is our task. Thank you.
I'd like to say that your presentation was extremely interesting. Your presentation on the ability of North Americans to fight from within against this empire that is presented as self-benevolent and a defender of the values of humanity, and at the same time that destroys humankind.
Entender. Nosotros nos creemos en un mundo libre muchas veces, estamos en democracia a veces, creemos que somos libres y resulta que estamos siendo siervos de estos mensajes que nos llegan a veces evidentemente, pero muchas otras veces subliminalmente sin que nos demos cuenta. Y no tenemos mecanismos de defensa. Creo que es fundamental buscar cómo defendernos y tener un distanciamiento crítico de los mensajes que nos llegan. Esa debería ser un tema de discusión. ¿Cómo logramos este distanciamiento crítico? Y la otra, esta es una reflexión y una pregunta. Todo este planteamiento que hace Rob, de tener que luchar contra esta idiosincrasia, estas ideas, esta mentalidad. ¿Cómo se hace? ¿Con qué tipo de organización? Porque o estamos llamando a que los individuos hagan una reflexión moral sobre su situación, que puede ser muy bueno en forma individual, pero bueno, ¿qué apoyo colectivo podemos crear para que no estemos solos en esta lucha?